Hello everyone. This video we're going to start with the anatomy of the head. So first I'll go into the head reference folder. You can also access this from the materials I give you in the description or in the files. Okay. So firstly I'll just walk through these different files that is over here. As you can see, it's all listed as different parts on the first name. And you can so for example, if you are looking for eye, and go through these four references to look at how eyes work. I think some of this is from anatomy next, anatomy for sculptures. It's all very good reference for us. And some eyelashes reference, some of the different eye reference. And then if you want to go into ears, you can look for ear reference. You can look for lips. You can look for lips reference. So a bunch of very good reference that I found to be very good for sculpting and very precise, letting you know the shape of the area specifically. So we are really focusing on the head today. Okay, and then we are really trying to nail down the structure of these various shapes. There's also this video, five mistakes that every artist makes. I'll put the link in the description and then you can go and check it out. About creating the structures correctly for the nose area as well. So you need to really understand the different shapes to be able to sculpt the nose properly. Okay, firstly we will start off with this two compiled reference that I find to be very useful. Previously, we have started off the old man's sculpture, portrait sculpting from a head plane. That is that was one of the default tools in Zbrush. Okay, so one of my goals today is to create the head plane from scratch. So we are also creating a head plane first before we move on to the next step. We can really say that this whole portrait or this whole bust that we are doing is going to be created from zero to final by us. Okay, that's a good thing that we can aim for. And then I'm also looking at one of the Danny Max tutorials. Danny Max has a lot of good tutorials out there. If you haven't followed him or subscribed to him, go and check him out on YouTube. Okay, so I'm also following one of his uh, his character sculpting. But some of the techniques there might be a little bit different from what I taught before. So I think I still want to consolidate and then do it through some of my techniques that I taught you all before, and then I think it'll be easier for everyone to follow. Some of these guidelines here is also created from based on other reference, and then one thing that is very important for us is all these positions. So for example, I've added the notes here. So equal distance between all the 1, 2s, and 3s. So 1, 2, 3, green one is all equal distance. And if we are checking the eye anatomy, 1, 2, and 3 is all roughly the same. So if you look at a person's eyes, like sometimes you may feel like a person's drawing or portrait looks off. So a lot of times it's the distance at number 2 over here. Either it's too wide or too little. And then people don't realize that actually it needs to be the same distance. And then in this portrait, what Danny Mac did is it's more of a stylized portrait. So his animation characters, the eyes are just a little bit bigger, which is fine for us as well. And then another thing to take note is 1, 2, 3 for the lips. So the first line usually stops right here, below the just below the nose area, and then a lot of people forget that this distance here and this distance here below is so different. And then at least most of the time, this can vary from person, but most of the time a normal or better looking person that we are looking out for could have the line should start here. All right, so equal distance once again, 1, 2, 3. So all the 1, 2, 3s, the distance is the same, and then obviously on the right side, all this pink color is all similar distance, and this is where the hairline begins. And then also, if you take note of this, I want you guys to check out the blue line, which is the end of the eye pupil to the edge of the mouth. So it's also very important when we are checking out for this. So the edge of the eye pupil. Um, so when we are looking out when we are sculpting the eye, we can start to think of where the pupil will stop, and then this one we can check at a later time. But it's always important for us to check this because the side of the pupil when it's the side of the mouth when it's in the neutral positions should kind of just rest together with this line here. So if you check all these lines, I can assure you that your model will look pretty decent. And then this red and cyan line, you need to look out for this negative space over here, because again, this can vary from person to person, but most of the time a person's his lower jaw will not be so protruding. But I do tend to see students or beginning artists, their sculptures, the lower jaw may be a little bit too long. Also, so it's just good to check this kind of thing, and then we want to focus on the silhouette more, and then able to check on all these details. So the details and the negative space between the red and the cyan line is very important as well. All right. So the eye is also very interesting. Is this top of the line goes to the top of the ear, and then the bottom of the nose goes all the way to the bottom of the ear. Okay, so it's very cool for us to have that as well. Okay, so without further ado, I think we should get started. Some of the other reference, I've given you different references, and then this one is one of the things that I want to start with. So if you look at the skull, you can see that it's kind of like a sphere, and then there's this shape in the front over here. And then this shape over here, this point, this dot over here, is also one of the reason why I want to start with a head plane, uh, instead of just directly starting on this model right away. Because I wanted to start on this to get this part here, because the head plane model, when we start with this first, and then if we just focus on these three colors, green, the blue, and the red, and the green one is actually the really important one that I want us to nail down, so that we will have these lines over here as well. And it's important because on my next reference, I tried to incorporate this in, but it will really look too messy. So we can't actually have all the information on one page, but we can start off with this, and then it will make our life much easier later on when we get these different lines nailed down. Okay, so yeah, so I'm going to break this video into us creating something like a head plane first, and then we move on to the next step where we will create and ship it closer to this. So that's my plan over here, and then let's get started. Okay, I'll go to Lightbox and open up a sphere, Dynamesh Sphere 32 out of my perspective. Okay, I already have my Pure Ref open, and it's set on this corner over here nicely. And I also have transparent to mouse click, transparent to mouse on. It's already activated. So later, if you don't know how to activate it, right click and then activate transparent to mouse. And then later, if I need to control it, I need to go down to my window to control it, to left click on it and control it. So transparent to mouse allows me to be able to trace my model later. Okay, so I'm just gonna check that I don't have any custom view set up, and I'll be able to trace it from the front view and the side view like this. Okay, pretty cool. We are also going to use Sculpt Pro. So Sculpt Pro mode. So it will allow us to sculpt. So let me just demonstrate. It will allow us to sculpt just the resolution and the divisions directly without worrying about dynameshing. So because it's like actively adding dynamesh all the way, it's really useful. You will like it. So let's try this out. Okay, side view. I'll go to side view, and I'll just set up my first camera angle here. I'll set this up here, and then I'll press custom view 2, which is also F7 on my keyboard. And I'll turn around to my front view. So I'm now looking at the front view, and I'll go and set this up to my front view. So I click on custom view 1. Okay, so side, front, side, front, side, front, side, front. Okay, so with this setup, I think I'll be able to match and trace it much better to a reference. So first thing, this cut using a number 9 brush, Control Shift 9. Now you press 9 and then you press Control Shift, you get a creep curve. And I'm just gonna cut it like this. The side of the mouth, I'm just gonna push it down like this and try to trace it to the view. See whether I can get this right. Let's go gonna smooth this out. So just kind of focusing on the lower portion for now. And now I'll trace it to the front view. Front view, push it down like this. And I want to kind of get this side plane going. So I'm gonna use my number 2 brush. I off my wireframe so that you can see what I'm doing. I'm trying to slice this part here. La 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 la. And I'm careful not to use too big of a brush because the brush size actually controls the how it tessellates. So if I use a big brush, it will tessellate a lot when I will do polish. If I use a very small brush, it will become very detailed. So that's how Sculpt Pro works. And at least I don't need to keep on worrying about the dynamic resolution in this case, which is useful. So I think the front view might be a little bit white, so I'll just squeeze it down. Okay, so I realize my material is too white, so I'm just going to change my material to be red. And I'll just shape it a little bit better. The front view, side view. When I'm snake hooking, maybe I'll be a bit careful because you also keep changing the Sculpt Pro resolution because I tend to use a very big snake hook brush. So yeah, a lot of details is gone because of that. Let me try to bring some of that back. Okay. There's this part of the lower ridge at the below the chin that I want to try to get. I can't really draw on top of my reference, but I hope you saw what I was doing just now. So I use a very small brush, push it in. This is my number 5 brush. My number 5 brush, my intensity, I want it to be low, so I'll just use 10 or 11. I want to get this ridge here. So I'm just indicating some of these lines to help me visualize a bit easier. Go to my side view again. And I just want to, oops, trace this plane a bit better. So this plane here, actually this curvature is kind of hard to get, so you may need to be a bit patient to get this part right. So having some patience when you're dealing with a head is important. I'm focusing on the lower part, and then now I'll try to focus on this, maybe this eye area. Okay, I'm gonna change to my front view, and I'm gonna use my number 5 brush and purposely cut inward here. So I'm doing 2 cuts very thinly, 3 cuts actually. So these cuts will give me an idea of where the center line should be, which is so important. And then now I'm making a bit more cuts. From the front view, I think front view really needs a lot of work. So okay, off my snake hook for now. Sculpt this Pro. And I want to push in the eye sockets of this area. Push in, push in, push in. Use my number 5 brush. I'm gonna cut this area here to cut inward. On my Sculpt this Pro again. Okay, intensity a bit higher, 17. Okay, and then I think now the cool part of Sculpt this Pro can be shown. Like I can just keep using my number 1 brush and build the volume on the nose, and then I think I don't need to keep on worrying about Dynamesh. You will just keep adding divisions for me. You just keep adding the mesh there, which is what I want. So important. So I want to make sure it recognizes this ridge. So I definitely want to define this ridge, and I don't want to lose this line. Use my number 5 brush and I press alternate to define it, and then define it again. Don't lose it. So I'm looking at my front view while I'm doing this, and then I use my number 2 brush, push in, define the ridge. Or 5 brush, push in, and just so now you realize number 5 brush is really powerful to define some of these lines on our head, on our model. So important. So number 2 brush, so make it a 5 brush. I'll cut this through a little bit more. I think needs to be cut a bit more, yeah. So this part of the nose, unfortunately, is need to shape it inward so that it will make more sense. Use my number 2 brush. Don't want it to be too big. And I'll try to define this line. So by having this number 2 brush, I attack here, and then I attack from this direction. And then it turns, I'll able to create a faint line here, which is this line. Okay, I don't want to sculpt this flow on my snake hook brush. I think that's the only thing so far. I have sculpt this flow on all the brushes except snake hook for this video, I guess. So yeah, you can on and off the snake hook depending on your needs, and I'm just using my number 2 brush to really define some of these areas. And once we have a nice head plane, you'll be able to use this head plane for your other exercise, like next time you want to sculpt another model, you can use back to this head plane again. So it's useful for us. So use my number 7 brush. I want to pinch in of this line a bit better. Push it down a bit more. So I think my line might be a little bit too slanted down, so I want to just push it up. Okay, let me check again. Checking in progress. So I think I can push this part down a little bit. Those can be pushed out a little bit. Ridge, the eyebrow ridge can be pushed out. It's kind of hard to define this area, so a little bit of chopping will help too. Clip curve. By chopping, I mean clip curve. So after chopping, it looks like this. Just define it a little bit better. Okay. Okay. I'm making sure it's really close to side view before I do any cuts like this. And if I want to cut, I'll press alternate twice. Then I'll change the angle to cut. Starting to come into place. The center part of the nose, I'll just pinch it in a little bit more. Number two brush. I'll just polish some of this. Let me on my Sculpt Pro back. It's the back and forth thing. So Sculpt Pro, sometimes on, sometimes off. A little bit of definition bottom. Okay, so now I'm looking at this part. I need this line running across and then a bit down. So this part of the cheek, I actually need to push it down lower a little bit so it's a bit more accurate. And then I have number 5 brush again. I press alternate to define line here. And I'll go to my side view. I'll press alternate this that goes all the way to the back, the head. So let me check. Okay, pretty close. Pretty close. I think so we don't need to be super anal as long as we are roughly close. It's good enough because later when we switch to another model for a reference, whichever model that you want to do, it might change as well. So this is kind of generic for now. Sculpt this Pro on. I just want to finish up a little bit more on the side. So I want this plane here on the side view. This red line here should be a bit thicker, which is why this face from the front view will look thicker on this red part here. So this is actually because of this red line here. So the center part of this skull is actually thicker, but the rest of it in green that I showed is actually pretty flat. So this part is a bit thicker, and then it just tapers outwards like this, which is kind of the shape that I have now. I'm just emphasizing it a bit more with polish. So I'll just polish and clean up these areas here. And I once again be careful not to make it too big. Just bring the brush size down a little bit so when I do a Sculpt this Pro, it doesn't ruin everything for me. Check my. I want to use a bit of bigger intensity brush. I want to check the sides a bit more. Just want to push in the corner on the bottom a bit more. Just a little touch, no? Just a little touch. It's not too much. Okay, so this is what I have for now. So a lot of use of number 2 brush, number 7 brush, number 4 brush to pinch things up. Off my Sculpt this Pro again. Just want to push in. Want to define the top of the head just a little bit more. And maybe a bit too much, but we will never know until we do it. So So I'm not afraid to use a bigger brush to try to smooth things as well, because if I use a big snake hook brush and Sculpt Pro, it will just really smooth out the area very well. So let me check front view, side view, and it actually looks pretty okay, pretty good. So I think I can almost end the video. But maybe before that, I just want to insert a sphere, cylinder, to create a generic shape of the neck. I think for the ear part, I don't want to. Not gonna do it right now, because I think later I can create it when I'm really starting to detail my model. So I think that's where I want to do it then. Okay, maybe before that, one last thing I want to just bring up this part just a touch more. So the part. Define this area a bit more. Oops. And then number 5 brush to just cut in a bit more. Number 7 brush, just pinch. And yeah, it's pretty fun so far, isn't it? And we don't need to actually change the Dynamesh at all. That's a really cool part. And we managed to get this line, so that's a good thing. Very good. So although I could have made it a little bit more polished. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, when I was doing this, my remember draw size brush is on. So my number 1 brush, my number 4 brush, their draw size is all remembered. So when I polishing, it knows that my polish size doesn't want to be too big, because Sculpt Pro is a bit sensitive, right? And then by remembering different brush size, it also helps. So let's say if I'm using op crack, I'll never use a very big op crack, like my op crack is always very small, like this. But when I use my number 4 brush, my brown 4 brush is probably always very big. So if I switch between number 4 and number 6, it switches and remembers the draw size for me. Straighten some things out. Okay, yeah, I should move on. A pen, cylinder, and I'm just gonna move this cylinder, scale this down a little bit, and position it as a placeholder for my neck. Okay, so switch it to this view. Seems to work quite well. I don't need to do too much. Okay, so for the placeholder, yeah, that kind of works for now. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Okay, so we'll continue the rest on the next video. All right, so I hope you like it. I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye.